Everyone knows Ladakh and a lot of people are getting to know Spiti. Both look like they are pieces of Mars on Earth, but if you were to make just one trip, which one should you choose? Ladakh and Spiti, both parts of the Trans-Himalayas, which means the rain shadow region of the Himalayas. It's basically the lower Tibetan plateau. If you see Spiti in the map, you can see that Spiti is placed right under the Changtang region of Ladakh. See, basically the Changtang region is a huge region. Only 1/4 of it is in India and the rest is in China. The Changtang in India is the eastern Ladakh. Where you have parts of Pangong, and below that you have Somoriri, and below that you have Sokar, and below Sokar you have the Spiti Valley in Himachal. In fact, there is actually a trek from starting from Chandra Tal in Spiti that ends in Korzok in Somoriri. Here we are not going to talk about the trivial differences, like for example, if you want to go to the highest motorable road in the world, you have to go to Ladakh, but don't go to Kardungla. If you've been following this channel, you know why. You have to go beyond Hanle. Fine. But on the other hand, if you want to go to the highest village in the world, you have to go to Spiti, and if you want to post a postcard in the highest post office in the world, you have to go to Hikim. So we are not going to talk about any of these. It's pretty unfortunate that we've reduced places like Spiti and Ladakh to fit inside the highest tag, like highest pass, highest village and all that. See, the thing is, these places are way beyond that. See, for example, the Changtang plateau that we talked about in Ladakh and Spiti, the average elevation is 4,000 plus meters. So you throw a stone, it's going to land somewhere beyond 15,000 feet. So these are not why anyone would travel to Ladakh or Spiti. The reason why anyone would travel to Ladakh or Spiti is, the Trans-Himalayas, the landscapes are such that you will not find it anywhere else in the world. Of course, you find it in Tibet. Obviously, you can guess that how difficult it would be to backpack or take a bike trip to China and then roam around freely. But both Ladakh and Spiti offer that. And the scale in which you see things both in Ladakh and Spiti is like no camera could record it. You cannot replicate it elsewhere. You have to be there. That is the bigger picture why anyone would want to go to Ladakh or Spiti. Even though both look similar for the casual eye, comparing Ladakh with Spiti will be like comparing apples with oranges. Because Ladakh is a massive region. See, for example, if you were to travel around Ladakh, not missing one village, one valley, you would be traveling 3,000 kilometers, and that is more than traveling from Kanyakumari to Chandigarh. So it's that big, and Spiti is not that big, but then Spiti is remote in other areas. So considering we do the usual Ladakh Nubra Valley, Pangong itinerary, and the usual Spiti circuit where you start from Shimla, visit the Kinnaur Valley, go to Nako, Tabo, Kaza, and then finish Chandra Tal and come through the Manali side. So these are the things that we are going to compare today. One of the primary differences is access. Even though Ladakh is huge, we all know Leh has an airport and you can fly to Leh directly. But for Spiti, the nearest airport is Chandigarh. Yes, you do have an airport in Shimla and in Kulu, but they are pretty unreliable because you don't have regular flights, and most of the time the cost is more expensive than taking an international flight. Considering you fly from Delhi to Leh, from Leh getting to Nubra Valley, Pangong and then back, and then doing the usual sightseeing like the Patar Sahib, the confluence of Indus and Zanskar in Sangam, you can pretty much wrap up everything in less than 600 kilometers. Whereas in Spiti, you start from Shimla, go to Narkanda, Nako, make the loop, come via the Manali route. It's going to be like 1,200 kilometers. So that is massive difference. Provided you fly to Leh, you can make an itinerary as short as 6 to 7 days for a basic Ladakh trip. Because of air connectivity, the distance you need to travel to complete a Ladakh trip comes considerably less. So obviously you can make a 6 to 7 days Ladakh trip. But whereas in the case of Spiti, you have to travel all the way on road from Chandigarh to Chandigarh. So the number of days gets a bit longer, like you need at least 10 days to make a Spiti trip, and preferably you need like something like 12 to 14 days to make a comfortable Spiti trip with enough backup days. So there is another aspect here. You can fly to Leh from Delhi any time of the year. That includes winter, and since the military is very focused on sending troops and supplies to both Nubra Valley and to the Pangong region, because of its proximity to the Chinese border, both Changla and Kardungla are open throughout the year. See, when it snows, yes, a few days it is shut down, but if you are ready to wait it out, you can still make it to Diskit or Pangong in any month of the year. So Ladakh is practically open throughout the year. Spiti, yes, Spiti is also accessible in winter. See, for example, if you want an appointment with the snow leopard, you got to go in peak winter to Spiti, and snow leopard sightings are a lot more easier and practical in Spiti than in Ladakh. So, but then there is a problem with Spiti. If you want to go only till Kaza and come back, you can make a Spiti trip in any month of year, because the route I told you that starts from Shimla, goes to Nakko and then to Kaza, it doesn't have any high passes over 5,000 meters. So it's practically open throughout the year. But there is a catch there. See, if you are making a Spiti trip, there is no point making a Spiti trip without making Chandra Tal, because Chandra Tal is definitely not one place you could miss on a Spiti trip. But unfortunately Chandra Tal is accessible only for 4 months, starting from June all the way till mid-September. If it is your first time trip to the Trans-Himalayas, I would suggest you go to Ladakh first, because there are multiple aspects to it. To make a trip to Spiti, you can do it as your first Trans-Himalayan trip, but it sort of needs a qualifier. You should have driven a car, or if you plan to ride in a bike, you should have made a 1,000-kilometer trip before making a trip to Spiti. See, because Spiti has less options to fall back. You have less backup options in Spiti as compared to Ladakh, because for example in Ladakh you go to the Nubra Valley Pangong circuit, you can easily fall back to Leh in case something goes wrong. See, the biggest problem in both these places is the altitude and the breathing related problems that happen in these two places, and I've got a video about AMS, acute mountain sickness. Please watch it before you make a Trans-Himalayan trip. So if it is going to be your first trip in the Trans-Himalayas, so provided you fly to Leh, rent a bike or go in a car, that's absolutely not a problem. But if you are going to Ladakh through the Leh-Manali highway or the Srinagar-Leh highway, or you are going to Spiti, it's always safe to do a 1,000-kilometer trip in an easier place than to make your first trip as a Trans-Himalayan trip. If you are going with a family, absolutely try making a Ladakh trip first before making a Spiti trip, especially if you are traveling with children or with elders, because in Ladakh you have more facilities, you have more access to facilities as compared to Spiti, because even today Spiti is largely remote, isolated, and it is raw, unlike Ladakh, which has got a lot of hotels and you have hospitals. As long as you are in Leh, you have a good chance of getting access to an oxygen cylinder in Leh than in Kaza. The airport in Leh is a gift to many because it reduces the distance traveled to make a Ladakh trip by a huge margin. But then it comes as a curse as well, because that's because Ladakh has gotten a lot more crowded than it could hold these days. But comparably, Spiti is more unadulterated and virgin as compared to Ladakh, because the distance traveled is still over 1,200 kilometers, and not everyone is ready to travel there, setting aside 10 days of their time. Spiti is comparably more remote and raw, and it still has the spirit of the Trans Trans-Himalayas as compared to Ladakh. See, the people haven't changed much. Even in Ladakh, I see people the same as, most of them are same as I saw them 15 years back. In Spiti, for example, if you go to these villages like Demul, which is still far away from even Kaza, where people don't visit at all, and you have some homestays there, you go stay with the family, I can see that, those are places that hasn't changed in like 15 years. It's pleasantly surprising to see that, there are still places that haven't changed in over a decade and a half. So if you want that sort of an experience, there are more options in Spiti than the usual Ladakh that you can go. You have them in Ladakh as well, but then you have to go a bit far away. Spiti is a valley, whereas Ladakh is a wide open desert. So you don't call it Ladakh Valley. Of course, you have many valleys in Ladakh, like the Nubra Valley, the Zanskar Valley and all that. See, a valley is basically where you have mountains on two sides and a river flows right in between. So in Spiti, once you cross Khab and get to Nako, you follow the Spiti river throughout. But whereas in Ladakh, once you land in Leh, you do have the Indus flowing, but it's not a typical valley because it's a wide open landscape. Because of this, in Ladakh you have wide open horizons, because in Ladakh, if you get on top of a pass like say Taglang La, you can see a vast stretch of the landscape. But whereas in Spiti, the mountains are closer, and in Spiti you have a lot of canyons, canyon type of landscapes where you have two vertical walls and you ride in between. So that is one major difference between Ladakh and Spiti. And in both places you have two different types of landscapes. See, for example, we call it Spiti Valley. It's become famous these days, but it's actually Lahol Spiti. So the western side of Kaza is Lahol, and the eastern side of Kaza is Spiti. The district itself is called Lahol Spiti because you have two different regions in that, especially if you go beyond Kaza onto the right to Losar and other places, right? So you have this flatlands, high altitude flatlands, but when you go west of Kaza, it's more like, you have deep gorges and mountains interlinked with each other, and you're right in the middle of it. So you have these two types of landscapes in Spiti. In Ladakh, you have the Ladakhi landscapes like the Nubra Valley, Pangong, which is, wide open, and you have Zanskar. Zanskar, it's one landscape which is way beyond anyone's imagination and expression, because you possibly cannot explain Zanskar. You can only see it or experience it. If you take all these four landscapes, they are vastly distinct and different. If you can sink into the landscape, you will know that no two are similar to each other. If you come this far into this video, I take it that you're like me. And coming back to the question that I asked in the title, Ladakh or Spiti, hire a motorcycle and go to Spiti, because over the years I've seen one difference between Ladakh and Spiti. Year on year, Ladakh keep on changing, and Leh is now nothing more than a hotel town. But see, even Kaza is getting a lot of hotels, but largely Spiti is still Spiti. And if you are in between a crisis, be it in your personal life or in a relationship or whatever it is, hire a motorcycle, go to Spiti. It can fix you, because it did for me, and I believe that if something works for me, it can pretty much work for anyone else. But remember one thing, if I go to Spiti and if I'm standing in Chandra Tal and throwing a water bottle there, I don't deserve to be there in the first place. See, if you ask me, patriotism is not waving an Indian flag sitting in India versus Pakistan match. It is considering your country as your home. So if you are taking my advice, I would any day choose Spiti over any other place. So make a Spiti trip. So that's it for now. I think I earned your subscription with this one. See you next week. Until then, travel more, travel safe. See you, buddy.